Hello and welcome to Power Pulp Comics YouTube. My name is Jim Rugg. Power Pulp Comics is a curated distributor of self-published creators, reimagining how independent books reach your shelves. Comics and zines from 30 creators are now available at powerpulpcomics.com. And if you're a retailer looking for something new for your shop, something a little more independent, we do 50% off wholesale to comic shop retailers. Again, powerpulpcomics.com. I'm very excited to welcome a new member to Power Pulp Comics. That is John Kelly, the creator and publisher of Dummy Zine, one of the most beautiful comics zines I can remember, and one of my favorite comic zines. John, welcome to Power Pulp Comics YouTube and to Power Pulp Comics. Thank you for joining me. And before
Jim,
we get into...
Thanks for bringing me on.
Absolutely. It is my pleasure and a privilege. Before we get into Dummy, I do want to let everybody know dummyzine.com is where you can go and find not just the Dummy Zine, but also some very interesting other products associated with Dummy Zine that you have made. Some really cool shirts, for instance, including an official reissue of the Dan Clowes Peter Bag Hate Ball Tour shirt from the early 90s. That's a personal favorite of mine. But what you've done with Dummy Zine also extends to the social media sphere. So anybody that's watching this, I would encourage you to give a follow on Instagram, Facebook, or YouTube for Dummy Zine under any of those social media headings. And that's something that we'll get into as we start going through the history of Dummy, John. But let's start right at the beginning. For anybody that doesn't know, maybe isn't familiar with the printing term, what exactly is Dummy?
Yeah, well, that is actually a good question. The website is called Dummy Zine, right? And initially it was my concept of what a zine was, which is like a self-published magazine, or that's where the term comes from. That can be about any subject that you want. I did zines in the late 80s and early 90s. And in some ways, like, grew up in that culture, and it introduced me to a lot of the people who I'm friends with now and people I've known for 30, 35 years. But is Dummy a zine or is Dummy a magazine? I don't know what it is. It's just the thing that I publish on a irregular, I guess, a basis. But it seems at this point it's like annual. And it seems like the next issue will be on that schedule. So we're looking at one a year. But it's just, what is it? It's just a publication about things that I'm interested in, right? And the first two issues took particular topics that I was extremely interested in and new people involved in those projects. And I knew probably more than most people about those subjects, but like everything, I didn't know everything. I wasn't there doing it. I mean, history, comics history, or any history is an interesting thing, though, too, because you think that if you read a couple of a bunch of articles and maybe watch a movie and read a bunch of wiki entries or whatever, that you got it down, but you really don't. It's unless you're actually there when something happens, which is not possible without time travel, right? But the only alternative really is to talk to the people who were there, and then talk to as many of the people who were there and get their take on things, and then come to your own thoughts on what that story is, right?
I was going to say, it's one of the great qualities of the first two issues of Dummy so far, and a lot of the media that you share on your social media is primary sources. It's not just doing the research, but really putting humans, the people who were involved in the case of the first two issues, that
Sure.
were front and center. It's their lives and their stories. that primary resource or primary source, it kind of elevates Dummy in a way in terms of the journalistic aspect of it.
Thank you. Thank you. I think maybe like starting with that, it's just, you know, with that first issue, um, the actor and comedian Paul Rubens, Pee Wee Herman, had just died, and I was friends with and knew, at least acquaintances with a number of the people who worked on that show, and especially on the merchandise for the show. And there was a lot of it. There were all kinds of things that came out of that, from bubblegum cards and stickers to apparel and games and all types of things that came out of that. And those people who were working on it at the time were, friends of mine. And so I was aware of that stuff because I'd seen the actual materials, either at the time or then, later on, in their archives of stuff that they held on to. But it was a story that it was really never told, right? Like how the visual identity of that show was created, and if it was, it would say that, like, well, Gary Panter and Wayne White and Rick Heitzman were the artists who worked on the show, right? And that would be the whole story, right? And that wasn't the whole story. There was a lot more to it that I fortunately had the access to those people, and I got them to tell me exactly how it happened, right? And at the time I wanted to write about that, with the news angle being the death of Paul Rubens, just, not for here's the true, the untold story or something. It was just like, well, this is my take on it, because this is what I'm interested in this. It was the design of the show, and the art direction of it, and the impact that art direction and visual identity had for years and decades to come after that. It had a tremendous impact, and it's still having an effect, right? And the other part of it was just like really cool stuff, right? And I fortunately was able to get access to things that maybe nobody else would be interested in seeing, which was sketches and notes and production pieces, things that I'm very interested in the process of how things, especially printed things, are created. So I was able to get access to that because my friends had it. And, I think last week I did a short little clip on social media where I opened up the box of the stuff that didn't get into the show, and that stack is like that high of images, right? I had 44 pages and a lot of text to fill, and there's not a chance that I could have gotten in everything that I thought should have gotten in there, right? There was so much more stuff, and a lot of times when you're doing these things, you are stuck with whatever image that you can get for something, right? Especially if you're writing something for print media that you don't have control over. You're looking for one photo that does this, another photo that makes this point, another one or two that make that point, just to sort of tie in the story that you're telling. And I was looking at this in a different way. I was looking at, like, how does the art and the text go together to tell the story? because to me, the art is always the star. My writing is whatever it is. It's my writing. It's it's researched and informative. I hope, and I hope people enjoy reading it. But it's really there to build upon what the images are presenting, because getting access to that source material is, I think, a thing that makes Dummy different than some other publications, you know.
Yeah, I totally agree. That first issue, The Art of Pee Wee's Playhouse, I think you've done a good job describing it, but it's so much more. If you're a fan of Pee Wee's Playhouse, I think, yes, you have to have this. It's incredible. But that's a revolutionary show. And the story that you tell about these artists that really made that show look the way it looked and contributed so much to that, both the show and kind of the cultural footprint of that show, I think it would appeal to any creative. Anybody who's trying to tell a story, anybody who's trying to make something, especially in this day and age, with YouTubers and TikTokers, there's the visual importance in Pee Wee's Playhouse is just massive. And I think that this first issue of Dummy really both captures that, gives us a sense of what it's like to create something really unlike anything else I can think of, that is also a huge success. It's just a fascinating story, and it's a fascinating behind the scenes story, which I think lots of people can relate to and a lot of people are interested in. So um, one of the contributors, one of the guys who I think you had access to their collection, Mark Newgarden,
Yeah.
a cartoonist, a thinker, a teacher, a collector. There's a little bit of an origin story of Dummy, I believe, in that you were guest lecturing in one of his classes at the School of Visual Arts,
Sure.
and
Yeah.
the subject was zines. Could you talk a little bit about how maybe that experience led to Dummy?
Oh, it absolutely did. Yeah. I mean, there's a couple of things that led directly to it, and that's probably, I mean, that is one of the most important ones. Well, first, I mean, Mark is my best friend and has been for a long time. He's somebody whose opinion I value above anyone's. I mean, and I'm not just talking about with my writing or comics related stuff. He's somebody whose value and opinion I judge. Anytime he tells me something, do this or don't do this, I listen, and he's always right. So, so he was my, been my friend for a long time, and he teaches at the School of Visual Arts where he was a student. And think about this: he was a student at SVA with classmates that include Drew Friedman and Kaz, and their professors at the time were Harvey Kurtzman and Art Spiegelman and Will Eisner and Jerry Moriarty, and just this incredible moment in history that resulted in the creation of Raw magazine. All of that stuff came together at that moment, and they were there on the ground floor as students of Art Spiegelman when Raw was starting, and all three of them, were in the early issues. And so, so Mark's been teaching at SVA for the last few years, has been teaching at other places prior, but he brings in guests regularly to talk to his students. The class that I've talked at several times is a graduate MFA or MA, I believe, program. It's a graduate student program. And Mark wanted me to come in and talk about zines, which I know, I know a bit about, having done them and been there during the peak moment of the late 80s and early 90s, when zines were, a whole other phenomena. They were there were a way that a lot of people, there was no social media, there was no internet, right? So there was no email. You you connected with people through mail at that time, and if you put out a publication about whatever it was, whether it was like what punk rock bands you liked, or art you liked, or food, or whatever it was, lots of people started doing their own publications, somewhat like the way that blogs were, at their peak a few years back, right? It was just like a self-expression type of thing. I did mine, and they were like bizarre and crazy, um, funny, trying to be funny, publications that involve comics as well, right? And anyway, Mark asked me to give a talk. It's not a short talk. It's like, it's a 3-hour class. So about the history of zines. And first year I went and I did it. And I did sort of like a overview of, here's the history of zines from, all the way back to whenever, to the peak, and blah blah blah. And then I had examples of the things that I did, which actually got I think the most response from the students, because it was a tangible thing, right? The second year, a year later, I went back to do it again. And as I was finishing up my PowerPoint for it, I was going over the slides and I was looking at them, and I was just like, God, I'm just like such a hypocrite, because here I'm going to be talking to these young artists and writers, about how cool it is to do your own zine, and I haven't done one in 30 years, right? I'm like, what is wrong with me? Because I've been wanting to do one for a long time. And a mutual friend of ours, Jim, Frank Santoro, for years last couple of years at least, had been bugging me to start doing my own zine again, and just to do it, right? And I was like, yeah, well, maybe, yeah, I don't know, maybe. But when I was putting together that presentation for Mark's class, at the very last minute, on the last slide, I mocked up a cover of a Pee Wee Herman, Pee Wee's Playhouse fanzine, right? Because I had already been working on an article about that whole story that ended up being in there, right? And I was just like, well, that would be something that could make for a zine, just like a one-off thing about that, right? And I could put the images in, and it probably wouldn't be that hard to put together. So in like, 2 minutes, I mocked up a page. It was like Pee-wee's World or something, right? And used one of the images that I had already gotten access to, and stuck it on the slide as a dummy of what a Pee Wee Herman zine could look like, right? And I put it up on the screen, and I said to the students, here's something I'd like to do. It's not real, but I'm going to do it. And if I come back here next year, you'll be a whole new group of students here sitting in these chairs, but I'm going to make one copy of this, and I'm going to bring it to the class to show, like, this would be what I would do if I was going to do a zine, right? And then, I came back from New York, back to Pittsburgh, and I told Frank Santoro about that, and he said, "Well, do it, man." And I was like, "All right, we'll do it. I'll mock it up in InDesign and lay it out, and then I'll bring it over to your house." He has he's a big photocopy machine in his house. He has a couple of them, I think. And I designed it, roughly as best as I could at the time, and printed out the pages on 11 by 17, double sheets, like, like boards, right? Drove them over to Frank's house and we ran them off on his machine and, flipped them over and made a zine, right? And folded it and stapled it, put on a glossy cover on it. And we made, I think, 2 copies, right? He kept one, I kept the other. And then I looked at it and I marked it up and went back the next Friday and we did a second version that I thought was like a little bit better. And I was like, yeah, this is cool. This is great. This looks terrific. And I thought that was it. I thought that was it. My goal was to make 1 copy of it. And I had it and I, was carrying it around for a while and I showed it to a couple of people. And the response that I got was really unexpected because people were saying, well, when is it out? Like, where do I get this? Right. And I'm like, no, this is not real. This is like the dummy of my thing that I would do if I was going to do something. Right. And they were like, no, you have to do this. Right. And I was like, I don't, nobody's going to want this. Like, nobody cares. Nobody is going to want something like this. It's just, they're like, no, people will. I'm like, yeah, like 5 people maybe would want that. Anyway, I decided, okay, well, I'll make up some copies. I'll send one to Gary Panther. I'll send one to everybody who was in the issue. Right. And then at kind of like at the last moment, I was just like, I'll make 100, right? It's going to take me 10 years. They're going to be in my basement for the rest of my life or something, right? But I'll make up 100 of them. And if people want them, whatever, okay, that's fine. So I got them back from the printer and they looked great. And I made a post on Facebook, which I never even go on anymore, but I posted it on Facebook and I said, if anybody wants one of these, I have some of them. Right. And then they sold out, like that first 100 sold out in like 2, maybe 3 hours or something. They were gone immediately. And I was like, oh, Jesus. Wow. I was not expecting that at all. And it just, everything changed at that point, right? I was like, huh, that's crazy. But selling that first 100 gave me enough money to print 300 more. And those sold out in a day, right? And then from that point on, it's just been, I've been reprinting and reprinting and reprinting every couple of months. And I just printed a whole bunch of them and they're almost gone now. So I'm going to have to reorder those again soon. So
what an incredible story.
It's
I feel like that's one of those stories.
Totally bizarre. It's totally bizarre.
It just doesn't usually work that way. It's usually the way you described it. You end up with boxes of them in your basement for the rest of your life.
I know. Right. And I think maybe part of it, who knows why, right? It was just maybe that particular topic was a trigger. It was, wasn't something I was like, oh, I'm going to do a zine about Pee Wee Herman because there's a gigantic fan base for that. That had nothing to do with it. It really didn't. But it clicked for some reason and it continues to sell like a lot. And then the one thing about related to that though, maybe is just the name of the, publication, Dummy, that came out of there too, because it was just, it was just, I was just right before I was sending it to the printer, it didn't even have a name, right? It was just like the Art of Pee Wee's Playhouse, right? Um, and I showed it to Mark Newgarden, right? And he said, you gotta call it something. I don't care if you call it John Kelly's zine, but it needs to have a name, right? And I was like, well, I've just been calling it dummy, the dummy of my thing, you know. And for anyone who doesn't know, dummy it means a couple of different things. A dummy is like a prototype copy of a publication. It's something that in the printing world, at least when I was younger, you would call the things that you would proof and look at to make corrections on the dummy copy of something, or it would be like like a prototype, like an idea of like what something might be. It would be called the dummy. Um, and I said, I've just been calling it dummy, and Mark was just like, yeah, that's a perfect title. Yes, call it that. I was like, okay, fine. And that's where that came from, and it seems like it seems like it works for that publication. So
Yeah, I think it's a great term because it does have a historical context, and I think that zines, a lot of times, we're looking for something tangible and real, right? People spend so much time staring at their screens now that I think there is a real hunger for traditional media, for something that is, I
yeah,
can hold it in my hands, I could give it to my friend, and dummy evokes that. It's a good word for that. I think I love that title, and I love how you've turned that into a bigger brand. And this might be a perfect time to talk a little bit about that, because I feel like after that first issue kind of takes off and explodes, then I start to see you doing dummy through social media. And
right.
it's very natural, I think, everything that you release under that dummy zine name, whether it's post on your Instagram, videos on your YouTube, subsequent issues of the magazine or zine, it all feels really like, if I like one, I like the first zine that came out, then I followed you as you started expanding on social media, and I've liked that quite a bit. So, at the top of this, I encouraged everybody, if any of this sounds good, go follow you on social media, because it does feel like a really natural extension of what you like, what you've collected. It feels related, even if it's not the same subject of each issue. Um, can you talk a little bit about that expansion? What prompted you to start doing the social media part of Dummy?
Well, for one thing, it's an interesting thing because like I've had always been a Facebook person, and I only I only went on to Instagram. I might have had an account, but I don't even think I've ever had posted anything on it. Um, but so I had like, I don't know, not very many followers or whatever, when Dummy started, and now I have a lot. I mean, it goes up by like 100 every week or something, right? It's I have no idea whether it's a lot or not a lot, but it seems like a lot to me. But I thought, well, if people want to know about the zine or publication, if they want to know about Dummy, I need to be posting some things about it, because obviously just one post selling out multiple times on Facebook um, meant something to me. It was just like, oh, well, that's how people get their information, right? So I need to I need to have more of a presence with Dummy on those platforms, right? Um, I quickly saw that Instagram outshined Facebook so dramatically as far as working for me, as for what I do. It's not even close. It like Dummy is much more, the Dummy audience is much more of an Instagram collection of people than it is Facebook. I mean, Facebook is fine, and I have great stuff on the 2 Facebook pages and everything, but if you can just, if I post that something new is coming for sale on Instagram, the things spike immediately, right? If I do it just on Facebook, if I, it's like done like A/B testing, right? That type of stuff. It's not even close. So I spend a lot more time thinking about the Instagram stuff. But you asked sort of a broad question, so I want to answer it. But as far as the social media growth, right? It came out of like, well, if I want people to know about the publication, then I need to present it on Instagram. And then, but I just didn't want to like just post, oh, here's the new thing you can buy, that I'm selling or something, because that becomes whenever you see a page that's doing that, it becomes okay, it becomes annoying. It becomes a commercial very quickly. And I didn't want to do that. So I was like, well, I'm just going to post other stuff that I like. Right. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it every day. I'm just going to post like a handful of images or thoughts about something that I think is cool on my Instagram page every day. And that has been where the real growth has come from, the stuff where I'm not just, I'm not pimping out Dummy like all of the time. I'll still like on a weekly basis, I'll have like a couple of things where I'll be talking about some product that they can get, but it's all related. It's all falling into the same world of types of things. So if people are interested in what I'm posting about broadly, right? Well, they would be interested, I think, in the stuff that I'm writing about or selling, right? Because, you asked about the merchandise and stuff, right? And part of that is that in a lot of the cases, it's merchandise that's from the artists that I'm friends with, or who are in the issue, right? And with a lot of them, I'm friends with them too, right? So in a way, it's also serving their fans, right? Because a lot of the stuff you mentioned, the Hate Ball Tour shirt, and there have been bootlegs of that being sold on the internet for a long time, right? And I was just like, well, I'll just ask. I know Dan Clowes and Peter Bagg. I've known them for a long, long time. And I said, well, I'll just ask them if they would be okay with me doing like an authorized version of it, because I know that people would rather buy that than to buy some knockoff thing, right? So, and it's like I didn't expect to have any problems, with them saying yes to that, because, especially Pete has let me do that forever, right? He's just like, he goes, if you're going to be getting stuff that people want, that's, that has my art on it, do it, do whatever, you just check with me first. But yeah, I'm going to let you, most likely I'm going to let you do that because it's for the fans, right? And I think the thing of them having the opportunity at least to purchase a Mickey Rat t-shirt from me that has gotten the okay from Robert Armstrong to sell it, that I give him money for every shirt that's sold, right? I mean, people are more, at least some people are more apt to buy it there than otherwise. And yeah.
Well, I was just going to say, I think that the other thing that really works, and you've described this a minute ago, is you're sharing stuff on Instagram, for example, and you're sharing your insights too, like why this or what is this from, some kind of personal piece that really makes it feel like an extension of Dummy. You know, it's still your voice that's attached to it. It's still your curator's eye. It's part of the reason I enjoy following the Dummy social media, because I like the Dummy zine, and it just feels like a very natural, you know, it kind of sounds the same, you know, it makes sense. And it's really great in the sense of it takes time to put together a full print issue.
Yeah.
This is a way to kind of continue the experience on my phone, you know, and sitting on the couch or whatever, and to continue, you know, looking at something that I enjoy, but filtered or curated through your collection and your eye. So yeah, I've been really impressed by it, you know, and it's interesting because we've known each other a long time. So I've heard pieces of your story and, you know, talked to you in between issues of Dummy and kind of heard some of your ideas for continuing this and doing different stuff. And it's just really cool to hear what you're thinking about doing and then seeing it happen and being like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, this is great. This works perfectly. It's been a really enjoyable experience. And, you know, the first issue, The Art of Pee-wee's Playhouse, the second one focuses on the Air Pirates, and really more than the Air Pirates, also kind of the history of Disney in comics and in, you know, possible parody kind of history of Disney. So I'm curious, why choose that? How do you choose what's going to go into an issue of Dummy?
Again, it's just like it's something that I know about, but I don't know everything about, right? It's something, the way that my mind works in a lot of ways is that I mean, I'm always wanting to know more about everything, right? And the way my mind is I feel like the only way that I can truly understand something is that if I write about it. And for me, writing isn't just writing, right? It's talking to people, it's researching, it's rewriting, it's rewriting a million times, right? Rewriting a million times, rewriting and rewriting and rewriting, and revising, right? And getting more information and changing, and then thinking, well, I thought it was, oh, nope, it's not. It's this actually, right? Going with the most best information that you can get at any particular time. And also not taking a side, right? Or putting myself into the story really either, right? It's writing about something that happened, right? And this is, as best as I can tell, this is what happened, right? And not really making any judgments either on any of it, right? You know, I could say the Air Pirates story is a completely bizarre, totally fucked up story. And it's one of these things that has been a part of my life for 50 years, right?
I was curious about that because there's a couple of references throughout the story of the Air Pirates specifically, you know, that some details of that case are taught in law school. And I wondered if that was one of your early encounters with the Pirates, or how did you first learn
I
about them?
was when so I used to work at Columbia University School of Law, right? And I knew, you know, I worked closely with a lot of the faculty there, and I knew that they had in some of the intellectual property classes, you know, they were talking about the Air Pirates case in their coursework, right? Because it's a you know, it's an Ivy League school that's talking about the Air Pirates, right? So there was that, but no, it's way before that. It's when I was a little kid, like maybe 11 or 12 years old. I was at a friend's place, and this friend of mine, I had an older brother who was in high school, and he had a secret hidden stash of underground comics. So this would have been around 1975 or something. So the Air Pirates story in real terms is right in the middle at that point, right? Um, but he had a stack of underground comics, and the ones that you could imagine would be there. There were a bunch of Zaps. There was Binky Brown, Justin Green's Binky Brown. I remember seeing that for the first time there, and a bunch of other ones, right? But in there were the two issues of Air Pirates Funnies, right? And I remember at the time, at age 11 or 12, flipping through these things, which were like, what am I looking at? These are comic, like, what the fuck, but mixed in with all of the sex and drugs and everything, and, weird drawing, were these two Mickey Mouse comic books, right? They were just regular, to me at the time, they were regular Mickey Mouse comic books that somehow got mixed in there with these other adult or illegal or whatever they were, things that I shouldn't be looking at, right? So I kind of like looked at them and didn't really pay any attention to them, right? But I kept going back to and like going through more of them. And one day I was just like, this Mickey Mouse, because I like Mickey Mouse, right? I just picked up the first issue of Air Pirates Funnies from that stack, and I opened it up and started flipping through it. And I was like, oh, these are not, this isn't what I thought it was. And I had no idea what it was, because it looked like Mickey Mouse comic books, but they weren't, they were, you open them up and there is sex and drugs and stuff. And in my head was just like spinning, because especially the covers were so perfectly done that they looked exactly like Walt Disney comic and stories. They looked like any other Walt Disney comic that I would have had at the time, right? They were so beautifully rendered. So let's say that I was 11 or 12 years old, 11 years old at that time. Around that same time, I grew up reading comics, comic strips, comic books, I read everything. Not just comics, but I read books voraciously, like anything I could get my hands on. But I read a lot of comics and read every type of comic that you can imagine. By the time I was 11 or 12 or something, the whole superhero thing for me personally was kind of over, right? I had lost interest in them. And so that would have been, say 1975, 76 or something, right? And I just wasn't interested in those anymore. But that, I'm not sure if it was that same friend's older brother or somebody else, but I started seeing more undergrounds and things like National Lampoon. And for me, Lampoon was a big draw. That really got my attention, because of the writing too, right? It wasn't, they had great comics in it, but there was, written by very smart people and very clever art and very clever art direction and writing. And, some of the stuff in there doesn't age well. But at the time for me, it was like a big deal, right? But they did have great comics. And my two favorite comic cartoonists in Lampoon at that age were Sherry Flanagan with Trots and Bonnie and Bobby London with Dirty Duck. And both of them were members of the Air Pirates at that time still, right? And I somehow put two and two together, and I was like, oh, these are the people who did those things, right? And that was just like always this thing in my head that I was just like, I want to know more about them, right? I want to know more about those people, because like, why would they have done, like, because they got in a lot of trouble, they got into tremendous legal chaos because of what they did. And I just, even at an early age there, I was just like, I couldn't understand why they would have done it, because it was just such a insane crackpot idea, right? and you know, and I continued to be interested in the air pirates over the years. And when Bob Levin wrote his book, the Mouse and the Pirates, I read it and enjoyed it. Um, but I wanted to know more about the story than had I read everything possible that I could have read about them. I read all of the legal. There's been many, many legal papers written about that case, and I would read those because I was fascinated with it, right? Um, but I hadn't really talked to any of the members of the Air Pirates about it um, until recently, the last couple of years, right? And I the first thing that happened was one of the members, Ted Richards, died, and I wrote a long obituary for him for the Comics Journal, where I went into a history of the Air Pirates and talked to members of the Air Pirates, mostly for the obituary memorial that I was writing. But I started piecing together that there was something to the story there that really hadn't been written yet. And I guess that was where the seeds of that issue, of issue 2, came from, right? So when issue 1 was done, and it was it still is a big success, I was like, well, what do I do now, right? And I had a bunch of different ideas of things and ran them all by Mark Newgarden and a couple of other people. And I don't know, finally came to the idea that, like, well, I could expand that Air Pirates thing that I wrote for the Comics Journal into like a much bigger thing, right? And it probably won't be that hard to do because I already have the basis of it done, right? I don't know. I don't think there's anything from that original piece that made it into dummy number 2, but at least I had made the connections at that point with all of the members, right? And so that's what I had set out to do. At the same time, another thing happened is that my wife Tammy and I were at during COVID, during the lockdown, I guess in 2021 or 2022. We went to the Billy Ireland Museum at Ohio State for Cartoon Expo Columbus that was held during lockdown. So it was a really weird one because there was hardly anybody there and everybody was wearing masks and stuff. And most of the people who were there were like students from the art school that's associated with the programming and everything. But Sherry Flanagan was one of the guests there, and her Trots and Bonnie book by the New York Review of Comics had just come out. And I remember as we were driving to CXC for the event, telling Tammy, oh yeah, there's this really amazing woman cartoonist, Sherry Flanagan, who's going to be there. I'm just like really fascinated with her. I love her work, but I'm really interested in the Air Pirates, which is this bizarre thing that she was involved in when she was like 20 years old, right? Anyway, we got to at CXC, and we met Sherry and became very good friends with her pretty quickly. And Bobby London was somebody who I had corresponded with over the years through email, and then got to know him like really well once I started on this issue, and same with Gary Holgren. And Dan O'Neill was another person who I'd corresponded with on various things over the years too. So I had like full access to them to give their full take on what the story was. And the interesting thing is that everybody had a completely different view of what happened, which is not surprising, given their youth at the time and the amount of drugs that they were doing at the time and how long ago it was and how, ultimately insane the idea of what they were doing was. And just, I don't know, for if people don't know what the Air Pirates were, is that they were a group of very young, very talented cartoonists, underground cartoonists who did these Mickey Mouse, like exacting Mickey Mouse parody comics in 1971, 2 issues of them, and then got into a tremendous amount of trouble with Walt Disney for doing them. And their case went on in the courts for all the way to the Supreme Court, for about almost 10 years, like 9 years, right?
It's an incredible story. I think, I commend you for the story that you wrote in that issue. I just think it's fantastic. And like I had mentioned, you do a great job of making a complete book there, because it's not just the Air Pirates. It's sort of like this whole history of Disney and
Yeah.
Disney outside of Disney in a way. But the other part, John, the artwork that you reproduce in this issue, I mean, one, tracking it down, but also the reproduction is of such a great quality. Like, you do a service to armchair comics historians, fans of comics art. It's tremendous. I wonder if you could talk a little bit about tracking down the actual artwork from these books.
Yeah, that's a lot of the work. Writing it is, I mean, I've been a professional writer since I was a teenager. So writing is something that comes easy to me. Finding the artwork that you're wanting for something is much more of a treasure hunt, and detective game. And for that particular issue, tracking down some of those pieces was unbelievably crazy, and took me either physically or via the mail, or electronically, all over the world, finding particular pieces of artwork that I wanted. Because I had after doing the first issue, I knew that I had to do something. I had to really ramp up the production on the second issue. Nobody was telling me to, really. Newgarden was. But all of the people who were buying that first issue just said, "Oh, it looks great. It's so incredible and everything." And I was just like, "Yeah, but if I knew that people were going to actually be getting it and wanting it, I would have made it look better, right? I would have made the design like more professional."
Do
And
let me interrupt you just for a second. For
yeah,
people
yeah,
watching this, that first issue is beautiful. It's it looks great graphically. I will say that second issue, I can't even describe the step up that you take there in terms of the reproduction and everything. But that first issue is beautiful. Don't sell that short. If you're watching
thank
this and you're thinking about them, it's a fantastic zine, comic, magazine, however you want to look at it. It's, I think, really well done graphically.
thank you,
But
thank
that
you.
second one is a different level of comics reproduction.
Yeah, and I think the first issue works perfectly fine for the content, right? Because it's
Definitely.
the guiding force for the Pee-wee's Playhouse is Gary Panter's loose, scattering, drawing style, right? So a more loose design style.
Punk rock.
Yeah, right, exactly. So I think it works. It works fine, right? For the second issue, I wanted to do more of a. Do you feel like a real serious thing, right? And also to treat the art seriously, right? Because that particular art, especially after all of the trouble I had to go through to track some of it down. I mean, we're talking about like driving across the country to pick up these things in clandestine locations, right? Bizarre stuff that's like, as I wrote, I think, it was like out of Breaking Bad, except for we were
Yeah, I was
handing
thinking
each
David
other
Lynch.
whatever. Yeah, something that doesn't seem real is often what it was like, right? Um, but I got every single piece that I was looking for. And I'm kind of astonished by that still, right? Um, and then once I was able to get it, it was just like, well, I've got to, I mean, I have like a flatbed scanner here that, you know, it's a big screen, 13 by 19-inch scanner and everything, and it does an okay job. But for those pages of especially the covers of Air Pirates Funnies 1 and 2 and the interior art and a lot of the other art that I had access to, I mean, I physically had it, right? I wasn't getting I mean, I got a lot of scans from people, but for a lot of that stuff in there, I physically had, at least for a little while, I had the copies of the actual art, right? And so I brought it to an imaging place, and it wasn't cheap to scan that stuff in as best as possible. But it's in Pittsburgh here. It's a place that like the Andy Warhol Museum uses, and the Carnegie Library and other places use to do their reproductions. So and then that
I
was
think
a
that's
lot
a really cool part of the process, that you're that hands-on. Early, right in the beginning, you said, not sure if it's a magazine or a zine.
yeah.
I can't answer that either. It's hard to say. Because you're so hands-on with it and take this much care, like you were there, and while these pieces were being scanned, making adjustments with the technician, and really
Oh no, I was
getting
scanning. I
what you can
eventually,
do.
he wouldn't let me do the first couple, but then I was scanning them afterwards because I wanted to do that. I wanted to actually do the scanning myself because, well, why not? I mean, where else? How often you're going to be having access to the best in the world digital scanner, right? It had like 8 million cameras in it or something, right?
That's so cool.
And it was gigantic. It was like the size of 2 refrigerators or something. It was massive. Um, and I think after the guy who was the manager guy who I was dealing with there, after we talked long enough, he felt comfortable enough with me being there that he let me do some of them myself. But it's the same thing. Like at other jobs that, like in my real life, in my professional life, I've produced a lot of publications for the places that I worked at, and I've always gone on press for those jobs. Even I had some very big jobs where I could have easily had anyone else go in and do a press check on this stuff, or not even done a press check, which is what most people do. But I would go out to the printing place, usually myself, just because I wanted to do it. I wanted to be there. I wanted to be at the printing press and watch the stuff come off of the rollers and look at it and put on a loop and look at check everything. To me, it's part of the whole process. And to me, it's one of the most interesting parts of the whole process of making something like Dummy is the production of it. And I'm just somebody who is extremely interested in the process side of printing and publications. And so, yeah, of course I would go and watch the scanning and stuff. And I mean, you and I have gone to Andy's letterpress studio. How many times have we been there together, like watching that stuff work? And it's just like, it's like in our blood, to want to watch this thing get made, because this is the actual thing. Especially in a world like the one that we're living in now, when nothing is printed, right? When it doesn't exist. And that's the other part of like the whole origin of Dummy story, is that, I started writing for the print version of the Comics Journal in, I think, 1990. And I wrote a lot of pieces for the print version of it. I mean, a lot. I have no idea how many, tons of them. right? A lot of cover stories, did a lot of interviews. And then when the internet happened and when everything started to go online, I've continued to write for the Comics Journal on the online version, and I still do. I had a piece a couple of weeks ago, and I have another one coming out next week, right? But it's not the same thing to me. It's not the same thing as I've probably written hundreds of pieces for the online version, right? But they exist somewhere, right? They exist here on the computer screen on your phone, but they're not something you can actually touch, right? And I was just getting sick of that. I was like, oh, here's another thing that I have no idea if anyone will see it, and I won't get any response. And it took a long time to write. And at the end of the day, I have to look on my phone or go on my computer to actually read it. And I hated that. I really did. I just became really not resentful, but just like I didn't like it. And I was just like, fuck it. I've been saying for a while that I'm just going to start printing my own thing again. And I don't care if anybody reads it or not. I'm just going to do it because I want to do it. If I'm going to spend this much time writing and researching these pieces, I want it to actually look the way I want it to look, right? And that was always a frustration with me too, is that online magazines or publications, they don't look like anything. They're just, you have like a bunch of text and then there's an image and then a bunch of like whatever. There's no design that goes into it at all, right? And I tend to always write really long and somewhat complicated pieces, right? If I wasn't me, there's no way I would read what I wrote because it's too much. I don't like reading long things on my phone. I don't like reading them unless I'm researching something specific. I don't like reading them on my computer either. I'll read the New York Times every day on my phone, but that means I'm reading a lot of headlines and about 2 sentences on each story, right? And then I'm always going like, well, maybe I'll look it up on my computer and actually read the whole thing. And I rarely ever get to that, but I just don't enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I love print. As you say, we've spent some very fun afternoons in the local print shop here.
Yeah.
Have you considered doing collections of some of your writing from either TCJ or the Comics Journal? With your platform now with Dummy, I feel like there would be, it's kind of a perfect outlet that you could continue to bring back some of these things that you've written and maybe reach a different audience or a wider audience with that.
Yeah. Sure. Like that was what Frank Santoro was really pushing for me to do, was to come up with a series of self-produced or whatever printed versions of things that I'd written for the Comics Journal in the past, and just like, or maybe put them into different categories and stuff like that, and have a couple of collections of them. And with that idea, I was like, well, yeah, maybe I'll do that. But that idea was like literally only for myself, right? Just for something that I would have on my bookshelf, right? That I would have like, well, this is what I wrote, it would probably be pretty, a pretty big stack of things. But, whether or not anyone else would be interested in that, maybe they would be. I think there are so many ideas of things that I could be doing. I would be in a great situation if I have 7 more of versions of me that I could toss work off to and have them work on, because in some ways
all you need is what, 60 more hours a day, something like that.
I don't know. I get up every day at 5 and I'm working until I go to bed, and that I do that every single day, right? And yet putting together one of these things takes a long time, right? I don't know, we're about 6 months out now since Dummy 2 came out. Um, I know that pretty soon, if I haven't already, and I think I have, I'm going to be getting texts or emails from people saying, "Where's Dummy number 3?" Right? I subscribed, and I love all of the people who have subscribed and who want to see more of it, and I understand that, but it's a lot of work. It's hard to do basically by yourself, right? Mark Newgarden is somebody who I talk to constantly and run ideas by, and he steers me in one direction and in another if I'm going off on something, but also has lots of incredible insight on what I'm working on or what I should be not working on. So, and then when we were, finishing up that last issue, he and his partner Megan and I were on Zoom every single night for a couple of weeks. Like every single night, we did it for hours, and we were going over Dummy number 2 cover to cover and looking at every single thing on the page and tweaking and changing slightly. It was just this minutia of like, well, where's that trap line? Is that falling on the, it was this really, really specific stuff that was very, very detailed. And, so
yeah, I talk about that cycle sometimes with people, and how as you get to deadline, it's just 24 hours. It's like whatever that object is, whenever you actually are like, it's almost at the finish line, it becomes 24 hours. Like I'll dream about books that I'm working on leading up to like the final, I'm turning it in now, because it's just obsession. It's like you can fix anything until you get it on, until it comes back from the printer.
yeah.
And so it's so intense as you get close to that end moment where it is just all encompassing. It's your entire life. It's your entire intellectual space. It's obsession. And then, you send it off and it's kind of like, now I need to like wash out my brain because it becomes out of your control. But while it's still in your control, those last couple of weeks, you just want to catch everything, make sure nothing gets past you. You don't overlook any of the smallest detail. And it's a strange cycle, the creative cycle.
It is, but you also know that you're going to miss something, right? But you want to minimize the amount of those things, right? It's just like, I have to say, actually, with Dummy number 2, there's one teeny tiny thing in that issue that when it reprints, I will change slightly, right? But that's it.
That's impressive.
It's, I don't know. Maybe I'm not reading it as often as I should, and I'll find more stuff, but I don't know.
Well, now you have a lot of other proofreaders out there with it. So, if anything else is in there, someone will find it.
But I haven't heard anything though. I mean, maybe there is, right? But maybe there is. But I'm also somebody who's so anal that, like, I've written a lot of fiction and other stuff, right? And I've been at readings where I'm reading something out of the published thing that I wrote. It appeared in some book or magazine or something. I'm reading like a short story, and I've line edited in front of the microphone. I've been like reading something and I go, oh, I hate this. And I've like crossed it out and like line edited on the spot as I'm doing the reading, right? Can always go and make something a little bit, until you just say, all right, that's enough.
Yeah, got to move on to the next thing. Speaking of which, I asked you for an hour. We're over a little bit, but if you've got a few more minutes,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
would ask, do you want to give us a preview of issue 3? You know, how is
Sure.
that coming? Do you know what that is?
Oh, I know exactly what it is. Yeah, I mean, it's in what it is a mystery. Not that a mystery that I'm not going to tell you, or not that a mystery meaning it's about mystery, like mystery comics or anything, but it's about things that are mysterious to me. Um, which in a way you could say either issue 1 or 2 in a way could fall under that category, sort of. Maybe not the Pee Wee thing, because I knew a lot of the people who worked on that. But still, I didn't know what I didn't know until I started talking to them, right? But it's a bunch of things in comics that I find strange or bizarre, and I'm writing about them, and or the issue's going to have things about that in there. But I don't want to go into too much detail about that stuff. But I will say that the people that will be in definitely will be in issue 3 are it's kind of it's kind of like a Hall of Fame thing for the dummy world. So it's Dan Clowes, Charles Burns, Gary Panter, Jim Woodring, and Mark Beyer will all be in dummy number 3, right? And then there's a whole bunch of other things that are completely bizarre that are going to be in there too, that I'm even more excited about those pieces. And with them, I'm working on a, several different stories, some of which I've been working on for a long, long time, like 15 years or something.
Oh, wow.
That I don't know that all of them will be solved. I mean, mysteries don't have to be solved in order to make them interesting, right? But
For sure.
there's still more information about some of them that's coming to light. There's a couple of cartoonists who are just fascinating, but like nothing is known about them, right? And there will be a few of those in this issue, right? I don't know if I'll get all of the ones that I'd like to get in there into this issue, but there's always the next issue, to I could fit them into that. But with Dan and Charles, we're looking at the OK Soda story, which has been told. It's like the Air Pirates. Like the Air Pirates story had been told in ways that were well done. But the story of OK Soda has not been told in the way that I'm interested in it being told. So I was able to talk to people from the company that made Coca-Cola, and the marketing company that worked on it, and I have their take on that story. But I spent a long time with Charles and Dan talking about what it was like doing that from their point of view, and that really there's in the articles that it's been written about that thing. They're just kind of like throwaway jokey lines in there, mostly by Dan. I don't know that Charles has ever talked about it, but we talked about it for a long time. And so I also have all of their original art from
Oh, wow.
from that, and to me that thing is a complete mystery, because it's like, how the fuck did that happen? Like, whose idea was it to do that thing? And I'm not going to be going like this was a stupid idea or whatever. I'm sure it really seemed like an interesting, workable thing to the people that were putting it together, and it is incredibly interesting. But maybe it's just in hindsight that 30 something years later you look back at it and you're like, who could have thought that would work, right? And that's not what I want to write about either, though. But to me
Yeah.
it was a mystery, because I didn't know anything about it, because I'm from New York, and it's not something that appeared in New York. It didn't. It was New York wasn't a market. So, and at that time there was no internet, and that's like, how do you get? There was nothing in the New York Times about OK Soda. You know, there was something in Time magazine at that time, but that's not like a publication that I was reading. So I had no idea about it for years, and then all of a sudden I started hearing about it. And I'm like, what are you talking about? Somebody made a soda for Gen X people, and they used this art? Are you kidding me?
Well, it feels like they came close, right? I mean, who could be better artists if you were going to launch a product like that? You know, it's
For people like you and me who would want it just because of that art, right? But like, it was, I worked in marketing at some big companies, for a long time, and I was just like, how the hell did that get through? Like, I mean, it's amazing. It's actually amazing that it happened, and I love it because of that. Um, but I also have some like really rare artwork from the campaign and stuff that
yeah, I was gonna
most
say,
people
you
haven't
showed me a
seen.
little bit, I think the last time I saw you or some recent time we crossed paths and you had some of
Yeah,
that promotional art. Um, I think I look forward to it. That sounds fantastic to me.
yeah. Well, to me, it's just like a funny thing, and I, you know I enjoy talking to Dan and Charles about it, and the other people too. Um, the Mark Beyer thing is, he's somebody who is a mystery himself. His work is mysterious. You know, he has not done a lot of interviews, and so there'll be an interview in there with him that's pretty extensive, but it's also going to show just all of his artwork that no one has ever seen, which I'm very, very excited about. Um, I've been helping Mark and his people. He's not doing well health wise, and I've been selling some Mark merchandise, T-shirts and posters and stuff on the Dummy Zine website, to try to raise money for his um, insanely high healthcare bills, right? So um, I would say, sadly, this will be the last interview, I would assume, that will ever be done with him. And some of it's from a few years ago when he was doing better. So, but for me, it's like um, he's one of my favorite artists, and to have him in an issue of Dummy, and we're also talking about working on some other projects. Um, so I'm very excited about that.
It's great to showcase him. He's such a unique comic book artist. You know, when I think of art history, it feels like somebody who would make sense in the 90s, except that he was working way before then, you know, where his art just talk about being different. You know, there weren't even like other people that were different around him, like
No,
peers or anything.
no, there's
So that'll be great.
it's from another world, right? No, and his stuff goes back to this, the mid '70s, right?
Right.
So um, then Gary Panther told me this insane story that I'm not going to go into details about, that will be in the issue two, in issue number 3. It's a totally crazed, mysterious story that I'm very excited about. And also, what I was working on all day today before we started this is this Jim Woodring piece on this bizarre thing called Jim Land Novelties, which was a series of novelty items and little, gizmos and stuff and pamphlets and things that he hand produced and sold years before he was doing comics, right? When he was still doing a zine called Jim, which was his writing and his art, but he had yet to done a single comic strip. But he would have pages in that zine, and I've known Jim since back then because going back to the zine world that we started with, is that I would correspond with Jim through snail mail, writing letters, and send him copies of my zines, and we would trade and stuff. So I've known him for 35 years or longer. But he, I had been bugging him about this, what these things were, and like, why. Just showed a lot of interest on my part in these things, because I thought they were fake. I didn't think that they were real items. I thought it was all a gag, that he was putting these fake ads in his zine for these non-existent items, right? But they were all real, and he handmade all of them. He might have sold some of them. He never sold any. Some of them he sold like one, maybe. Some of them he sold a couple, right? But there were things that you could have gotten for like no money at all that were handmade Jim Woodring items back in the early 90s or late 80s or mid 80s, whenever, early 80s even. And so he ended up giving me, or, not to keep forever, but mailing me a giant box filled with his entire archive of all of that material. So I have it right here, actually, because I'm working on that piece right now. And so I'm very excited about that.
That sounds cool. Is that something you'll have to photograph those? Or, they're like objects?
Some of them will be photographed, but some of them I'll just scan, you know. But there's a lot. So it's sort of, in my mind, it makes sense because it's the theme of mysteries and everything, and I'll have to compose it in a way that visually looking at it, it is designed in a way that it makes sense, that they all go together, because they're all sort of disparate tangents and stuff. But that's the next challenge, is putting it all together as one piece. Although, I mean, it's
I like hearing that. It sounds different than the first two issues.
It's very
almost as
different,
different as the first two are from each other. This feels like, yet again, sort of a different format, a different concept and everything. That's exciting to me.
Yeah, I don't want to do the same thing over and over again, right? People have been saying, "Oh, you should do a second volume of Pee-wee," and I'm like, "Yeah, I'm sure that would sell well, but I'm not interested in doing that, right?" I hope, I mean, my plan is to never do an issue or anything with Dummy because I think it's going to sell well, right? It's because it's something that I'm fascinated by, and it's something that I want to learn more about. To me, that's the guiding principle behind doing any of this stuff, because it's too much work not to be invested in it, mentally and emotionally, right?
Very well said. John, is there anything else here before we wrap up? Anything else that I missed or that you want to let everybody know
just
about?
that I'm very excited about Power Pulp and the opportunities of having this kind of club or something, whatever it is. I think it's in a really great thing, and I think it's something that's needed, and I think it's going to do really well. And I'm very excited to be joining the creators who are there now, and the ones that'll come as a result of the ones that are there now, and the ones that are coming in. I think it's something that can really help all of us, at least, and also help, the retail stores. It gives them the opportunity to purchase things, not not one shots, right? And for us, it's going to take a big burden off of me, keeping track of having to mail out. Sometimes I'm sending 500 copies to one place, right? Sometimes I'm sending 5 copies, right? but it's just like a lot of stuff to keep on top of. And if I don't have to do that, that's great. And I think just the sort of the brain trust that everybody will bring to this, and the opportunity to share ideas and best practices will really help all of us, and it'll just make all of us stronger. So I'm very excited to be joining this group.
Well, I'm very happy that you're joining us. Like I said, I don't think I could admire Dummy more than I do. So if you're watching this and you know my work or you like my zines, please check out dummyzine.com, check out powerpulpcomics.com, and keep going out and looking for the good comics and the good zines, because I think that's something Power Pulp can help too. As a fan, a collector, and a reader, I miss so much. Like everything is so siloed on social media, and I hope that Power Pulp Comics is one more way to so that people don't miss something, or that they find a new favorite comic, a new favorite cartoonist, a new favorite book, whatever the case may be. But hopefully it just makes it easier for everybody on both sides of the table, the readers as well as the makers.
Right, right.
All right. Well, thank you again for your time, John.
And the retailers too, because without them, those people are fans of our work, and they're the people that promote it and tell their customers what's new and what's cool. And so they really help us all of the time, right?
Yeah, and it's where I find a lot of the stuff that I
Sure.
love. It's through these retailers. So
Yep.
hopefully we make it a little bit easier for them to help us and to help their customers and readers and collectors. And I'm very much looking forward to see where Power Pulp goes and where Dummy goes. So thank you again for your time, John. And we look forward to more.
All right. Thanks, Jim.